Hi, everyone. Oh, great. Tom, Amelie, Paola, Gaetano, I hope I've said your name right. Abir. Hi, everyone. We're just going to wait a minute more for the slow coaches, like I'm usually in that category. And then we'll get going. If you want to write in the chat where you're from, if you want to say why you're here, if you're hoping to get something out of it or a particular topic to come up, then do share. We will try and cover it all. We aim to please. Hi, Vicky C. Thanks for joining. Sarah, Hope. Hi, Hope. I think that's Hope from my team. You can put in the chat box where you're dialing in from. No. Yeah, well, you know, zooming in from. Panelists at the ready. We'll give it one more minute. Welcome everyone that's joining.
Technology is so great. We're connected from all over, and the pandemic has been terrible, but I think it's great that we are able to still connect and come together in some ways, like in a visual ways. It's pretty cool.
It's so good. I love how online events have really taken off. I really love it. Like I don't know whether we would have done a panel discussion like this before and if people would have turned up to it, but now people are getting used to this format. Yeah. Porto from Portugal was in Lesbos through Indigo. Yay. Sorry, I'm super biased. At Refugee for Refugees, yes, for September and November. Welcome. Leonor, I'm from Portugal, been following Jazz and HuBB on social media for some time now. Whoa, hey, guys, you got fans. Amelie from France, hi. Welcome. Okay. Maybe guys from Victoria, let me know if you think now is a good time to start off. We should wait one more minute.
Hi, love. Maybe go one more minute, Holly.
Okay, sure.
One more minute, then we'll go for it.
Gulwali, Leonor has read your book. We'll be talking about that.
Yeah, please read my book if you haven't. And you said about fans. I'm actually a fan of Jazz, so if that counts.
That's mutual, Gulwali.
No, I'm a fan.
To anyone who hasn't read it yet, go and buy it on Amazon immediately because it was life-changing for me.
Even though I'm not a fan of Amazon, they don't pay their taxes, but still read my book.
Sorry, not Amazon.
Yeah. No, Amazon is
buy
good.
It from Gulwali.
I mean, they can get it from Amazon, which is fine. Put a link, but they can get it from Refugee Europe Support is selling it. Refugee Support Europe. Refugee Support selling it on their website, and some percentage actually goes to their work as well. They work with refugees in Cyprus. They have a dignity center where they make handmade things. Refugee, they have online shop, but I mean, you can get it from Amazon, fine. But I feel guilty.
Yeah, I think the panel, I think we're all quite big fans of each other, so there's a lot of love amongst the panel. I'm very happy to be hosting you guys. And also just getting all this information out of your brains, as I'm sure many people here are hoping to do as well. Welcome, Andrea. Excellent.
Thank you so much. Hi.
Hi. And for those that have joined in the last minute or so, we are going to start very, very soon. Maybe just put in the chat where you're from and what you're hoping to get out of this. If there's certain topics you want covered, we are going to have questions as well that you can ask, and we'll try and answer them either as we go along or at the end. Paola from Turin, Italy. Ooh, and I'm Vittoria's cousin, Yana.
Ciao.
Sophie, I'm zooming in from London and volunteer with Indigo on our grants and fundraising. Yay. Hi, Sophie. So nice to see you. Okay, great. Okay, should we start? Yeah, excellent. Okay, thank you so much everyone for joining. I'm really excited about this next hour and the conversations that are going to happen. So this is the refugee crisis now, and I think that's important because a lot of so much happens so quickly, and it's always changing, so it's always good to get an update of what's happening. And we've got the most amazing panel of people who work in the scene and have a lot of experience. So yeah, it's going to be really good conversations, and it's called Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things. And I definitely think this panel are doing very extraordinary things. So I hope this is going to be really informative for you, a really nice space to learn, not feel silly to ask the most basic questions. There are no silly questions. So yeah, you know, are boats still arriving? What's the definition of a refugee versus a migrant? You know, all of those things that people, it's so important we learn this and we know this. So I'm going to open up with the question of what is actually happening at the moment. Like I just said, are boats still arriving? What are the camp conditions like? And I'm going to start off with Jacob, because he's in Samos. Actually, before I do that, oops a daisy, can you guys introduce yourselves quickly, then answer that question, Jacob?
Sure. Well, maybe I'll say who I am, and then I'll let my fellow panelists say, and then maybe I can come back and get to that. Yeah, I'm Jacob from Bristol in the UK, but I've been in Greece now for 4 years. My initial 2 months in Greece just was extended. I now direct a non-profit UK charity, a Greek organisation too, called Action for Education. We work across the Aegean Islands, running quite a number of different centres that work with young kids, teenagers, but also kind of young adults up to about 23, 24. And alongside that, I also help direct Europe Must Act, which is a more recent, more political, more advocacy-based organisation that's really putting pressure on EU policy and national policy across Europe to create a more fair and humane policy around migration for refugees.
Amazing. Gulwali, do you want to go introduce yourself next?
Yeah, sure. Hi, good evening. Good to be with you. I'm Gulwali Passarlay, originally from Afghanistan. I've been living in Britain for the last 13 years. Spent about 10 years of my life near Manchester, a place called Bolton. Recently moved to in a place called Kettering in Northamptonshire. I'm the author of this book called The Lightless Sky, and I do a lot of work around advocacy and campaigning for refugees' rights and using my experiences to raise awareness.
Amazing. And Jazz?
Hello, everyone. It's such an honor to be here. I am the founder of an organization called the Worldwide Tribe, and it's an online community of people that support refugees, and we do lots of storytelling. So I raise awareness and try and advocate for refugees through the power of stories, films. We have a podcast, and we give talks in schools and universities. And we actually have a new film coming out on Thursday, which I'll probably get an opportunity to talk about a little bit later, which is about the channel crossings that we've seen an increase in this year. So yes, the power of the story and supporting refugees across Europe and the Middle East through that.
Amazing, thank you, Jazz. And last but certainly not least, Vittoria.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for organizing this beautiful event. So I'm Vittoria, I'm from Italy. I am one of the co-founders of HuBB, Humans Before Border. We are an international platform that strives to raise awareness around the so-called migration crisis through a lot of different actions, from protests on the streets to organizing events in schools and universities. Now we're just launching a project with some of the relocated and accompanied minors from Greece. Since January 2020, I've been working in Samos. Now I'm just back to Italy since 2 weeks. I was working with an NGO that is called Refugee for Refugees, which is working mainly in distribution of essential aid to migrants and asylum seekers.
Thank you so much, panelists. So going back to the questions, sorry, I was so excited to ask them. Yeah, what is happening at the moment? What are the camp conditions like? Are boats still arriving? Jacob, over to you first.
Yeah, thanks, Holly. quite a big question. I mean, where to start with an issue that can be looked at on a global scale, it can be looked at on a European scale, it can be looked up on a local scale, whether that's in the UK or Greece or in the Canary Islands or wherever you're based. I mean, I think you know, summed up, there's basically just a shift globally where more and more people are leaving their homes for a variety of reasons, and they're being met in so many places with really hostile politics, with a lack of goodwill, a lack of welcome, and that's creating as a symptom these different humanitarian crises or these migration crises, depending on where you actually kind of sit politically. It's termed in very different ways. So where are we now? Well, I mean, at least from a European sense, we're 5 or so years into a big shift in European politics when millions of people were coming from the Middle East. And over the last 5 years, ultimately what we haven't seen is a transition to a fairer, more stable system where more people have access to rights. Quite the opposite. We've just seen kind of chronic political issues from the UK all the way across the European Union that's basically just withholding anyone's right to dignity, to humanity, to basic services, from where we work, also to education and shelter. You know, are boats still arriving? Well, of course they are. People are finding so many different ways to travel, because it's not a question necessarily of choice, it's a question of need. And whether those boats are coming into Greece, whether they're coming across the central Mediterranean into Italy, or now whether they're coming possibly into the Canary Islands or into southern Spain. This is a crisis of politics ultimately, where we should be offering sanctuary and welcome to people on the move. But in so many places that's not happening, and that's what we're often fighting to provide, an alternative system where people are safe to move and people are safe to find and build a new life. I'm sure it's a big question, so I'll hand over to someone else.
Thanks, that's a really good point of view you've got. Victoria, maybe you want to go into, you just got back from Samos very recently and have been doing distributions with Refugee for Refugees. Do you want to talk about more so about the conditions and what you were distributing and why you needed to do that?
Yes, for sure. Samos is one of the 5 Greek islands in which, after the EU took it in 2016, there were this system created of the so-called hotspots, which are basically centers for reception and identification of migrants and asylum seekers. And Samos at the moment is the second biggest in Greece, is hosting a population of around 4,000 people. The center was created designed for 648 people. And at the beginning of this year, we had numbers of around 8,000 people. Then the Greek government managed to kind of decrease the amount of people in the camp, but the conditions are still really terrible. It is not just about living conditions, which I am sure that I don't have to go too much into detail, because we've all seen images and reportage all over across the internet. What I wanted to focus more was maybe about the asylum system and the asylum process. So most of the times there are shortcomings in the Greek asylum system, and this basically causes a regular human rights violation as a lack of legal support and lawful treatment during the asylum process. So basically people don't get access to the legal support that they need during the process. And this is just about their legal process, but about other cases of human rights violation. We see constantly every day a denial of access to essential healthcare, and not just healthcare, but basic services. Like, for example, Action for Education runs this amazing educational center, and they have been shut down now for months. Jacob, maybe from March. Unfortunately, because of COVID, which has been used, let's say, as an excuse to stop providing vital services to migrants and asylum seekers. Other violations every day are negligence from care professional, unlawful incarceration with inadequate deficient facilities, sexual abuses, mistreatment from the police. And unfortunately, so on.
Thank you. That's really insightful as well. Gulwali, do you want to speak as well about this? I understand you know a bit about Calais as well.
Sure, yeah. Firstly, thanks to Jacob and Victoria for the work they do. And so I made this journey about 13 years ago, coming from Afghanistan as an unaccompanied minor at the age of 12, made it to the UK at the age of 13, went through about 10 countries, a lot of back and forth imprisonments, treated very badly by authorities, especially. I had a terrible time, across Europe except Italy. Italy was the only place I was welcomed and treated quite humanely. And so in terms of the situation of what's happening now, things has got worse and not better. So I spent a month in Calais in 2007, November, around this time, earlier this time. So I made it to the UK on the 16th or 17th of November. It was cold, it was miserable, it was not a place for humans to live there. I was very touched by the warmth and kindness of strangers coming in, volunteering there and giving us food and clothes and water. So there was a lot of people from the UK actually coming in, helping us, but our situation and circumstances were terrible. We used to get harassed by the police. And even now, actually, the British government, the taxpayer pays for the French police to take away blankets of refugees and take away their shoes and harass them. And we spend millions in building fences, and that's why people are coming across the channel with small boats. I never imagined when I was making that journey. I mean, I went through a lot of hardship and difficulties, and I saw deaths on many occasions. I go to the UK on the back of a refrigerator truck, which if the driver had put it down, we could have lost our lives. Very similar to the one that last year, sadly, the 39 Vietnamese people lost their lives in. But, I never imagined one day that, the people will be actually crossing by boats, the English Channel, which is the busiest line in the world and one of the most dangerous water. But it's happening because, as Jacob was saying, we don't have alternative routes. We don't have safe and legal routes for people to travel. There are about 3,000 people stranded in Calais, a small number who wants to come to the UK for all sorts of reasons, family reunification, language reasons, and also because they are unwelcome elsewhere in Europe. And again, we have this idea in Britain that why don't people stay in France or in Italy, in Greece? Well, people do stay there, but these countries are struggling. Last year, the UK had about 35,000 asylum applications. France had 150, Germany had 170, Greece had over 70,000, and Italy has more, and so does Sweden. So all the European countries, well, the main major players like Germany and Italy and Spain and these border states, they do a lot more than we do. We have this mentality that we don't want to share this responsibility. And so I feel like we have a moral and legal obligation to welcome people, not to mention that Britain has been involved in these conflicts where people are fleeing from Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq. And so we also have a personal responsibility towards these people. And we shouldn't expect France to deal with it. And we can't take preventable measures without having an alternative. Like the government talks about, making it unviable, making it more difficult. I mean, the hostile environment hasn't worked. It put lives in danger. These people are desperate. We got to help them. We had to find a way where we could perhaps give them humanitarian visas. We could allow them to claim asylum in France for the UK. I'm sure there's ways that can be done, but the political will is not there. And I think there needs to be pressure on the government to do the right thing to like the family unification coming to an end from the EU because of the Dubs Amendment and also the EU Dublin regulation, which would allow people to be transferred between member states. We're leaving Europe. With the whole Brexit situation, it's making it more and more dangerous and harder for refugees. So I feel a personal relationship to what's happening, and I feel saddened by what's happening. Things has not been improved. Whenever I visit back to Calais and when I go back to Europe, I'm able to leave that place because I have a piece of paper. I have a piece of a document that I'm able to travel back. And these people are treated just the way they're treated because of their nationality and because of their citizenship of not having the right documents. And ultimately, we should treat people as people, not because of what papers and what documentation they have.
Thank you, Gulwali. That's so beautifully said. And thanks also for sharing your journey, because I think that really helps people to understand that when they read an article that says, 30 people have been found dead in the back of a lorry, it's people like you, and it brings it to life. It's a real human, it's not a number. And that's so important. And like you said, if that lorry driver that you were on had turned on the refrigerator, you might not have survived that journey.
Exactly. And again, it's not about numbers and statistics. These are human beings with hopes and aspirations, just like us. Unfortunately, they find themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time. And again, I wasn't born in Europe. It wasn't my fault. Where you were born is an accident of birth. And I've been encouraging people. I think I travel across Britain. People are very generous. People are very kind. But we need to turn that kindness, generosity into action and get people to pressure the government, get parliaments to do the right thing. But at the moment, the government has been doing everything it could to make life difficult for people like me and for people just like us who need protection. And claiming asylum is their human rights. It's not a crime to claim asylum, and people need to understand that even though people come here through irregular means, illegal means, there is no such thing as illegals, but through illegal means, that's still okay in international law. People have to understand that. And also this idea that you have to claim asylum in the first safe country, that's not what the Geneva Convention says. So I hope, there's a lot of misinformation, and people don't realize, we are not the top 10 countries for taking in refugees. We're not even the top 20s. Less than 1% of our population are refugees. This idea that we are full, we can't help people, it's just not true. Yeah. We are the 5th, 6th richest country in the world, and we've got to stand up for our moral and legal and responsibility. I mean, this week is Human Rights Day, and we champion human rights, but when it comes to refugees and migrants and foreigners, I mean, look at with the Windrush generation, how Britain has been treating people in such an inhumane way. Our asylum system is such a dehumanizing system that I did not lose hope on the journey across half of the world, but I lost hope when I was in the UK, because the system made me feel suspect, a criminal, unwanted, unwelcome. So the whole asylum process we have, it's not fit for purpose. It treats you as a number and statistic. It doesn't. You're a political tool. They want to reduce numbers. You're just one number for them. It doesn't matter the impact, the consequences of their actions.
Yeah. So well put. You also mentioned, Gulwali, about in 2007, I think you said you were in Calais and all of the things that happened. Jazz, you've started in Calais, right? And what was it like when you went to Calais? What did you experience? Had things improved since Gulwali's time?
Well, things are always changing in Calais. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I started working there in 2015. And things definitely looked very different then. So that was in the time when there was much more of a formal camp known as the Jungle, still an informal settlement, but it was, shops and restaurants and actually some kind of infrastructure where NGOs or grassroots groups could support the community in Calais of refugees and asylum seekers who were there hoping, or most of whom were hoping to cross to the UK. But unfortunately in 2016, the camp as it was then was demolished in its entirety. And since then, people have not gone anywhere. There's still thousands of people, as Gulwali said, attempting to live and cross the border from Calais without that infrastructure that the Jungle actually provided, and it's harder to support them without the ability to, for them to congregate at all. So we see a lot of police brutality there, a lot of policy to make sure that nobody is putting up tents anywhere, nobody is kind of settling there, making the situation harder and harder for the people who are there. We've just seen this week that Priti Patel has signed more rules with the French authorities to make sure that it's harder to make the crossing. It's less viable for migrants to make that crossing from Calais, but absolutely there's still people there. And to answer your first question, how are things kind of changing at the moment? It's winter, so potentially we are seeing fewer numbers of boat crossings because the risks are increased due to weather, but like Jacob said, people will continue to come because it's not about choice, this is about need, and there's many reasons why people do not stay in France, do not choose to stay in France. But yes, Calais has changed a lot since 2015, and I would not say for the better. I think it's harder than ever to be a refugee in Calais right now.
Yeah, and I think it really surprises people how much Britain is involved in what happens in Calais, and the conditions that people in. It's designed as torture they deliberately take people's belongings and everything, their sleeping bags, their tents at 4 or 5 in the morning. Every other day, so people get sleep deprivation, and it is a known form of torture. And they also continually replace the police force, because if they keep the police force the same, they'll start to question and maybe and ask questions, but if they keep moving on, they go, okay, well, I'm on my new mission now. So they're continually a new flow of police doing it, and it's absolutely
exactly that. We've seen I've heard countless personal accounts of police brutality in the area, so and systematic racism and violence, really, tear gassing, stealing shoes, smashing phones, bulldozing possessions. You're absolutely right, like many accounts of such activity.
Yeah. And moving on to the, where are people coming from and why are they making the journeys in the first place? I'm going to go back to Jacob for this.
Yeah, I mean, here I can talk a bit more about the situation in Greece specifically, because over the last few years, that demographics changed quite a lot. You know, back in 2016, 17, there are a far greater number of people coming from Syria for obvious reasons. That has shifted over the years. We've seen different groups of people and different nationalities coming. I mean, for example, right at the moment, there's a lot more people from Palestine arriving. There have previously also been a lot more people from certain sub-Saharan African countries coming as well, especially following the kind of the greater restrictions in the central Mediterranean route, that route from, you know, Libya to Italy. And that's just one example of how, you know, when you just create a more hostile border, or you externalize that border into another continent such as Africa, people will find another way. And that resulted in this instance to people, you know, coming to Turkey and then across into Greece. People are coming from just so many countries. So across the Middle East, sub-Saharan Africa, Iran, Afghanistan, many other countries. And the reasons for people are coming, well, you know, it really can't be summed up in a webinar in an hour. Each story is different. Each reason is really different. And so often it's not necessarily our place to even ask that question. And maybe that's maybe what I'll say, rather than going into specifics. It's, you know, our work is about ensuring that there is a very basic level of humanitarian dignity or service in this context. It's not really about where you're from, where you're going. It could be absolutely anyone in this situation. All we care about is that wherever you are on this journey, that you have your rights upheld. So for me and for our organization, it's simply, you know, we welcome you, regardless of your background, your race, your language, your nationality. Yeah, I'll pass over to the others.
Yeah, no, that's really beautiful, Jacob. And I mean, doing working for Indigo and doing volunteer coordination, when I was processing the applications, when I was working in Greece in 2016, 17, I was doing lots of the applications at that point. I got so many emails, and I know that we still do, saying that people want to volunteer with Syrians, and we say, okay, well, it's not just Syrian people, and people are like, but I really want to work with Syrians, and it's like, they are not the only people that need help. But also we use this as an educational opportunity to try and explain why there's people from other countries, and you know, people are only saying that because they don't know. They're obviously not saying it to be horrible. They're trying to help. So it's about educating, which I think is really important.
Yeah, I was going to say, and that's not just volunteers. I mean, that's so systemic, that issue. I mean, we, as an organization, we apply for funding in different places, and it's so often you come across grants that say, you know, a grant of money for organizations that provide education to Syrian children, as if we're going to, you know, open a center that's just for people from one country and leave everyone else outside. I mean, it's completely insane. And yeah, as you say, it's an opportunity for education. And for also remembering that it's not just, you know, you can't, in these crises, you can't simply focus on the most prominent nationality or the most vulnerable group. I mean, there are vulnerabilities across every category of person. We are all inherently vulnerable when put in this kind of situation. So we need to really widen the kind of definition of vulnerability so that we take full perspective and then find the adequate ways to actually support people.
I think the people that write those grants, or those bits of text have not been to see what it's actually like, and they're not the ones who have to say, oh no, sorry, you group of children, you have to stay outside, you can come in. That doesn't really work like that. I've also seen on many occasions people pretending to be Syrian if they're from another country, because people treat them differently. People treat them a lot better, and that is also terribly wrong. There's something really wrong, because as you say, Jacob, we could never cover in an hour why people leave, and politically what's going on, what people's cultural views on certain sexuality or religion, and why people there's so many reasons. A country might not be at war, but they're persecuted for absolutely so many other reasons, and and you can't ask someone every time, hey, tell me your story so I know whether if you really need help. So yeah, you're right. It's not, it's just such a big topic. Yeah, Vittoria, did you have experiences with, yeah, why people are making these journeys and where they're coming from?
Well, people are definitely, as Jacob was saying, making the journey for many different reasons. But simply speaking, normally a migrant is someone that chooses to move for some reasons, whereas a refugee is someone that has been forced to move from their own country. And this is because of multiple situations of, as you said, persecution or conflict or violence in their own countries that makes it impossible for them to go back. And as a result of this situation, they require an international protection. So that's this is how the international law defines the word refugee. I come across as I was working in Lesbos and Samos in the last 2 years. Yeah, people were mostly from Syria, from Afghanistan, Congo, Iraq, and Cameroon. These were the countries that I've been working with mostly. And as Jacob was saying, vulnerabilities can be found throughout these all nationalities.
And Gulwali, thank you, Vittoria. Gulwali, you made the journey at such a young age. What was it like? Who were the other people that you were seeing along the way? Do you think that shifted now?
Yeah, sure. So when I made the journey, I was usually would be the only youngest in the group. There was a lot of adults who supported and helped me. And that has changed in some ways. But whenever I went back to Cali in 2016, 17, 15, and recently I went back to Greece and Paris, I still see young people. I still see unaccompanied minors. I saw a young boy as young as 8. So that's really heartbreaking. And the situation, again, has not improved. Just to answer the question, previous question about the top 5 nationalities are Syrian, Afghans, people from South Sudan, people from now the Rohingyas from Burma, and now recently, the Venezuela in Southern America has kind of become the second nationality of fleeing because of what's happening in the country with the economic situation. But Afghans used to be the largest refugee population in the world. We used to be the largest asylum seekers in Europe until the Syrian conflict began. Of course, I have a lot of sympathy and empathy with the Syrians, and the 12 million displaced, about 8 million internally displaced, 4 million refugees. But there's a hierarchy of refugees, unfortunately. Not only the way funding applications are made, but the way government treats people. So almost 90% or so Syrians will get asylum in the UK or in Europe, but if you're an Afghan, your chances are less than 50%. At the time when Germany accepted 1 million Syrian refugees, which was great, they were simultaneously at the same time deporting Afghans. So that's just so unfair. And last year, there was a crisis group report out which said Afghanistan was the most insecure country in the world, even before Syria. So the Afghans have been refugees, not only in the last 20 years, but in fact, in the last 40 years. My grandfather was a refugee in Pakistan. My father was a refugee, and I'm a 3rd generation refugee. So it's just really unfortunate the way there's a different class of refugees. For example, in the UK, if you come through the resettlement scheme, we are taking about 20,000 from Syria in the last 5 years. You are treated very differently. If you come through irregular means, you're kind of penalized making that journey yourself, even though there is no alternative available to you. So I feel like there are 80 million displaced people in the world, 30 million refugees, even though I don't like using statistics and numbers, but that 30 million refugees, half of them are children. And most of these people need help. In the UK, hasn't been standing up to its responsibility. As I said, less than 1% of our population are refugees. Germany is the only European country in the top 10 receiving countries. I mean, Lebanon, 1 in 5 people are Syrian refugees. Jordan take us a huge number. Turkey, Pakistan, Iran, there's huge Afghan refugees there. We have, Afghanistan, more than 5 million internally displaced people. We have about 3 million retainees from Iran and Pakistan who are struggling, who needs help with education, with healthcare. The war is still happening. People get displaced not only because of conflict, but they get displaced because of natural disaster, flooding and droughts and so on. So I just feel like I wish there was some equality when it comes to, if you're a refugee, no matter your background. And so sometimes that's just really unfortunate the way the Afghans, there's very little solidarity and sympathy towards Afghans. It's systematically done. For example, if you go on the Foreign Office website, it advises you not to travel to Afghanistan, but it's okay for people to be deported. So the UK continuously has been deporting people to Afghanistan. It never started deportation to Afghanistan, even though it's the most unsafe country in the world, unfortunately. If it was safe, people will go back. So just like, putting things into perspectives, of course, I know all respect and sympathy with the Syrians. They have lost so much, they have suffered, but that should not come as an expense There should not be an opportunity cost to it for other nationality. In the same time, when I was in Cali and also in my trip, there was a lot of racism, even with the way things were done. The Africans were treated very differently. So people from Sudan, from Somalia, from Sub-Saharan Africa, they were Congo and other places were treated very differently by authorities, as well as even like people, even refugees themselves, unfortunately. And so the Afghans, the Afghans used to hang out with the Kurdish, and so there was always like groups of people which kind of would mix and other will not mix. So sadly, racism is very prevalent in our society, in our world, unfortunately. But just like we had to be aware, we need to be concerned, and we had to be educated. So yeah, things has not improved in my experiences. I wish it was. I mean, my book, we wrote it 5 years ago and it's still very relevant. I wish it wasn't. Of course, as an author, I'm happy it's relevant, but then as a refugee, it makes me really sad that it's still, the refugee crisis only become refugee crisis because it hits our border. There's always been crisis. There are people living in Kenya, third, fourth generation refugees, and there are people living elsewhere in the developing world who are taking most of the 85% refugees are living in developing countries, not in developed countries. So this, there's a lot of misconception, misinformation. So I hope people will read and understand and be aware, be better informed and educated about what's happening, and help and support whenever they can.
Yeah, that's really interesting about the people don't realize the racism that happens within camps. I've seen it. Jacob, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, no, I did. I mean, just to say that this, this racism is to some extent really, it's written not only into camps and in informally, but into the very policies that determine someone's ability to claim asylum. And in a country like Greece or across the EU, it works through a lot of the systems, or the process by which someone applies for asylum is governed by the averaged acceptance rate from that country. So when you come to a place like Greece, if the country you come from has a low acceptance rate, they will put you into a different system. They'll kind of move you into a different queue, and that queue is often then fast-tracked. Which means less attention to detail, possibly more chance for mistakes, less time to have legal support in your application. And that then creates these cycles where it's not individual people's stories that are being listened to, but rather, some idea of where you're coming from as a country as a whole. And this is really dangerous. We need a humane system that is humane in the sense that it recognizes the human story behind each person. And unfortunately, this form of racism is really written right into the policies that we have.
Yeah. And if I may add something, thank you, Jacob. Unfortunately, the new pact that was proposed back in at the end of September, the new pact for asylum and migration, is just going more and more into the direction of deterrence to people, so creating more hostile environments, hosting environments, and then also, as you were saying, basing the acceptance or denial on the previous statistics. Basically, the new pact was trying to respond to this this flux of migration that was here, and this crisis, because we didn't have a system that could respond to the flux. And the response was, instead of why there is so much illegal immigration, because there are not enough legal channels to respond to this huge need of migration of people. The response was, let's try to stop this illegal immigration. Stop, full stop, nothing more than that. So there is nothing in the new pact about how to create new legal channels. And this is absolutely a disgrace, because they have been working on the pact for 2 years, the Commission. They've been talking to all the EU countries to try to find a common ground to respond all together to this situation. They've been talking about solidarity for years now, and how to improve the solidarities, how to force somehow solidarity, because it's something that needs to be forced apparently at the moment. And then they present the pact, and it's just a disgrace, unfortunately.
Yeah, you'd think they might come up with something a bit better. Tom asked a question. I'm not ignoring it. It's just, it ties in really nicely to a question we have at the end that will summarize it really, really well. So I will get back to that question, Tom. But I actually want to go to Jazz now, because Jazz, you have a really interesting, well, your family fosters unaccompanied minors, and for people, just explain what an unaccompanied minor is for people who don't know. And also, did your brothers have the same reasons for making the journey? And why, part B of this question is, why do people want to go to certain countries? Did your brothers want to come to the UK, and why do people want to go to certain countries?
Yeah, so I am blessed to have 4 foster brothers, all from different countries. And actually, Gulwali is better placed to talk about this than I am, because he was an unaccompanied minor himself. But an unaccompanied minor is a child refugee who comes alone to the UK, and this can be for various reasons. So my brothers all have their own individual story. They're from 4 different countries, so from Eritrea, Sudan, Afghanistan, and Libya. And actually, just to follow on from the previous question, you know, when I first went to Calais, I also had the idea that the word refugee was very associated with the war in Syria for me. And I think that that is perpetuated by our media. And when I went to Calais, I recognized that, or I soon learned that there were people from all over the world represented in this camp. And the 3 main nationalities were Eritrea, Sudan, and Afghanistan at the time. There's also a big Kurdish community in Dunkirk. But yes, so 3 of my brothers are from those 3 countries, and then I have a Libyan brother as well, who's 13. And they all came to the UK alone. 3 of them don't have family anymore. One of them, my Eritrean brother, does still have family in Eritrea, but he fled compulsory military service there, age 13. My Sudanese brother fleeing genocide in Sudan. Yeah, as we've mentioned, you know, each individual story is unique, and from what I've experienced, very valid in their asylum claims. It's been a beautiful experience for me to learn from them and to be a part of such a diverse family. And in answer to the second half of your question, why did they not stay in France? And this is a question that I see a lot on social media, a comment that a lot of people make, you know, why do refugees not stay in the first safe country, or they should stay in the first safe country that they go to, right? And if we take France as an example, you know, for most people here, at least for us, we might see France as a safe country because as a Brit, it is. But it's a very different story for refugees and asylum seekers that are trying to make a life there. And we've touched on some of these points already. So as Gulwali said so well, just number 1 is numbers. You know, there's a huge amount of refugees seeking asylum in France. I think in 2019, we were looking at numbers of over 150,000 asylum claims, whereas in terms of channel crossings this year in the UK, we've had 8,000. So it's a huge disparity just by the pure geography, that there are a lot less asylum claims in the UK because you have to cross this very dangerous body of water to get here, right? So that means that there are longer waits in France, more rejections, more chance of being deported back to a dangerous country, which is dangerous in itself. Also, we've touched on the conditions, you know, in the UK, as an unaccompanied minor, you are provided accommodation. In my brother's examples, they were put with a family, but you can also be put in sheltered accommodation, supported accommodation. And as an asylum seeker, you do have access to accommodation in the UK. Whereas in France, you know, I've met children as young as 9 who are living on the street on their own, which is absolutely not safe. Police brutality, as we've mentioned, you know, that's the first experience of authorities in France that many refugees and asylum seekers have. And there is, as we said, a lot of systematic violence there towards refugees, a lot of racism towards refugees and migrants, which, you know, once you make it to the UK, again, the way that you are received by police in the UK is quite different. And also language and family connections. You know, I've met a lot of Afghans that worked with the British and the American armies that worked as translators that speak English already. If you took some time to think about where you might go, did you have to leave your country, you'd likely go somewhere where you can speak the language, you're more likely to get a job, maybe you've got some family connections there or some friends. So that's often a reason for people to be going to the UK as well. So they're some of the main reasons that I've heard directly from people. But as I say, each story is individual, and people have their reasons, and it's a small amount. Let's just also focus on the fact that it's a small amount of people that are trying to make it to the UK. As Gulwali mentioned, many refugees are staying in the first safe country. If you look at the numbers in Lebanon, the numbers in Jordan, they're far greater than they are here.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because when people say, oh, there's so many flooding our borders, and you say, oh, okay, what's the percentage out of all those that go to their neighbouring country? And nobody has any idea, because they don't know. So it's really important to educate yourself before making such statements.
Mm-hmm.
And the information is out there in really user-friendly forms. If anyone wants some, we can send a link. Gulwali, did you know that you wanted to go to the UK?
No, so basically when I started the journey alongside my brother, we were separated when we were handed over to smugglers by our family. We were separated before even the journey began. So I was keep looking for him everywhere I went. And about 9 months into my journey, when I was in Greece, after surviving the Mediterranean, the Aegean Sea, where our boat broke down and I was about to be capsized, and we were thankfully fortunately rescued by the Greek Coast Guards, which I'm speaking to you because of them, but actually now they're the same Coast Guards are drowning people purposely and pushing them into dangerous water in the middle of the sea because of the illegal pushbacks and how the hostility has increased. So I heard from a smuggler in a place called Patra in Greece that he has met my brother, and my brother was heading to the UK. So that's when I made a decision to come to Britain, but I didn't know how to get here. I had to find my way around. And as I said, the only place that treated me nicely and kindly and with compassion and with care was Italy. I was in a children's home for 2 weeks, but they couldn't understand my situation that I needed to get to England to find my brother and to be reunited. But if it wasn't for my brother, I would have certainly stayed in Italy. So Britain was never really my intention. I would have stayed anywhere I was welcome. And that's the misinformation and lies of the politician and the media tells that everybody wants to come here. It's not true. I just said very small number of people are stranded in Calais. At the peak of the refugee crisis in 2015, 1 million people entered Europe and only about 10,000 wanted to come to the UK. And again, why shouldn't people come here? And I think people see Britain as a place of security and safety and protection, really see it as a champion of justice and equality and fairness. But actually, when you get here, that's not all true. It's quite terrible, the system, at least the bureaucracy. But I know the country and the people are generally quite welcoming. So yeah, my intention wasn't to come to the UK, but I ended up here, and I'm glad I did. And but again, I wish I didn't have to make the journey. I wish I didn't have to go through the experience that I went through, and I just wish there were a better way going about it. I mean, I had my brother here legally through the EU laws. I should have been able to come here through legals and safer means, but that wasn't offered to me. Nobody really told me about that. So usually the UK is very good at deporting people back who have fingerprints in Europe. I mean, now because of Brexit, almost every week they're sending people back to Germany, to Greece, to Italy, to Lithuania, to Poland. There's charter flights everywhere, to Belgium and so on, because after Brexit they'll not be able to do that. But when people are stranded in Greece and elsewhere who are family member here, the Home Office do everything it can to continuously delay that process. And so that's the misunderstanding of people that everyone wants to come here. And again, we should be proud of the fact that we are a safe country and people want to come here for protection and sanctuary. That's not something that we should not be. We should be proud of it, not be afraid, and just realize that when people can't get jobs, when people can't get a doctor appointments or police a school placement, it's not my fault. There's lack of services, and that's not the fault of foreigners and immigrants and refugees. In fact, we pay more in taxes, we contribute more to society than we take out. So there's people just blame us for we are a scapegoat. I mean, for example, asylum seekers are not allowed to work. People say, oh, you're here for our jobs and benefits. In fact, asylum seeker can't work, they can't get benefits. They had to live on £5 a day, about £37 a week. Just last week they increased it by 20 pence a week. Imagine how do you survive on £5 a day for years? Sometimes people are in limbo for years. So, and also we are the only country in Europe where we detain people indefinitely. So in the UK, we have the three things I have huge issue with. We have a lot of failed asylum seekers. They become destitute, they become homeless on the streets. They work for £2 an hour in the black economy to survive, and they've been exploited. We have deportation policy, the most hostile across Europe. And then we have a detention where you could be put in detention, which is like a prison, but without a prison sentence. You could be there for years, for months, you don't know. And you're a crime just seeking protection and safety. And you have seen enough violence, conflict, persecution, injustices, suffering and pain. And here you are expecting to be treated with humanity and dignity. That is not an offer. The Home Office just wants to make your life more hell. As I said, if you read my book, people will see that I lost hope and I gave up on life in the UK when I was safe and secure, because the system was such, it dehumanizes me. It kind of destroyed me within. And so that needs to be taken seriously. I think it's just sad to see the situation. Just recently, I've been helping a young Afghan who has been age disputed. A lot of Afghans who, when they come here, they're not believed. There's a system of disbelief. I was age disputed. It took me 2 years to get my age and nationality accepted by the Home Office and Social Services. It took me 5 years to get my refugee status. It took me 11 years to get my settled status. I'm still waiting for my citizenship. So the process is from asylum to become a citizen. It's a long journey, and you're always kind of in a legal limbo, at least until you get your refugee status. So there are people waiting for 10 years for their cases to be decided. So we're not a soft touch. We have one of the harshest and most incredibly inhumane immigration policies in the world, in my view. And so when people, I feel like our government has been speaking the language of Nigel Farage and the language of people who a few years ago were unacceptable. So it's just disheartening.
I think a lot of people don't realise how difficult it is. Yeah, if you're a refugee trying to come, or an asylum seeker trying to come to the UK, and it's the same in many countries. It's not as easy as, oh, here's all the money in the house and you go and have a good time. Like, I think that's honestly the picture that is so often depicted, and it's really obviously not true. Like you say, people can't work, and people have really got so many talents and want to work, and it's really set up against them working and contributing and things. So that's just really good to highlight. I mean, we could talk about this a lot, and also the discourse that everyone wants to come to the UK is simply not true. I mean, if you actually go to the field, I think the most popular country that I experience is Germany. People, when you say, where are you heading to? Everyone's like, Germany. That's the one that I come across the most. There's Sweden and France and Spain, and sometimes the UK, but that's really like fifth or sixth from my personal experience.
And people get a lot more support and help in Germany. They get in here, you get £36 a week. There you get a lot more. In France you get a lot more. So it's not the money that people come here, but I think it's the people really think Britain is a place where they could achieve, they could become successful. Because again, in Europe, there's institutional racism in Britain, but there's, I don't like this idea we're less racist, but we are compared to other countries. Like, there's issues in France and in Denmark, and there's a lot of racist governments and right-wing governments, like in Hungary, in Poland, in Czech Republic, and so on and so forth. But the UK is, fortunately, quite welcoming and a diverse place, a multicultural place. Yes, there is challenges and issues, but I have friends and families in Austria and elsewhere in Europe. They find it really difficult to practice their religion, to practice their, being able to have their culture because of policies and because of hostility and so on. So there is a positive side why people come here to the UK, not because of the weather, obviously, but I'm sure there are a lot of good stuff. And as I said, it's not everyone wants to come here, and it's fine. If people want to come here, we should provide them that opportunity to do so.
Gulwali, you mentioned just then about illegal pushbacks. I think it would be really great to hear from Jacob. One of the questions is about injustices that are going on, and illegal pushbacks is one of many. Can you explain what that is and any other injustices that you think you can summarize in a minute or two?
How long do we have? I mean, this year more than ever has been a year where just the sheer candidness or the nakedness of injustice has just kind of played out right in front of us every day. Illegal pushbacks. This is when a boat is trying to come from one country to another with refugees, is met by that country that would receive them. That could, for example, be the UK, but I'll focus more in Greece, for example, by the Hellenic Coast Guard, and is then dragged or pushed back into the waters of the other country. Or even worse, what has happened more recently is that people even arrive onto the land itself, and are then a few days later taken back onto the sea and pushed back. So not only is that actually completely going against international law, but it's also genuinely just putting people in a very unsafe position where they're on a boat, maybe they've reached land, maybe they haven't, and then they're being dragged in the middle of the night into the sea and then left there to float without any motor. So I mean, on the one hand, it's really dangerous, and we're seeing so much of that this year, and it's not hidden really, it's not unknown. There have been attempts by different organizations to call out the Greek Coast Guard, to call out Frontex, which is the European border agency that also has oversight and a responsibility for this. It's been discussed on a European level, on a national level, and all the important figures are just rejecting it. Now, whether or not you want to use something like the Turkish Coast Guard as a source, But if you were to, you can go on the Turkish Coast Guard website, and they list every day. You can search pushback by Greek vessel, and you get a whole list. This year it's close to 100 incidents where the Turkish are saying, look, this boat's been pushed back into our waters, it's a criminal offence. And you know, this is just one aspect of in a whole number of other really horrible and disgusting and inhumane accounts that are being forced upon people fleeing conflict. But I could really go on. I mean, there's so much in the way of just violence and police brutality, and yeah, it's too much.
There's so much. I think we've covered it, and we're going to try and wrap up in the next 5 minutes or so. One more question before we go on to some from the audience, which it's nice because we wrap up with those anyway, is, are all refugees and migrants young single males? I mean, Jazz, you've got 4 foster brothers you were saying about. Is everyone a young single male?
Yeah, I can speak to this. So I have met a lot of unaccompanied minors who are fostered in Kent through my brothers, and many of them are boys and young men, yes. There are girls, I've met girls, but physically it's a very difficult journey to have to make. As we've talked about, you're crossing the water. There are children and women that do that, but lots of my brothers all came in the back of lorries, one hid underneath the Eurotunnel train. Physically, it's demanding, and also, as we mentioned, they're often fleeing military service in their countries. So there's a couple of reasons as to why it might be more men. And in Calais, again, there was many men, but depending on where you are, there is a different demographic. So when I was working in Greece, there's huge amounts of women and children, and the same in the Middle East, in Jordan, in Lebanon. So the people who make it to Calais, it's a very difficult journey. Gulwali can vouch for that, physically, emotionally, mentally. And yeah, I would say that it takes a lot of physical strength to make it to the UK.
Can I just add, sometimes people ask this question not with good intention, because as though sometimes people ask it as though that, you know, they would welcome children and women, but they will not welcome young men because they're dangerous, they're extremists, they're a threat. The actual fact is, you know, places like Afghanistan and Syria and elsewhere, usually women are not the target and children are not so much the target. It's the young men who are, you know, to join the Taliban, to become suicide bombers, to fight the government, to join the army, join the police and so on. You are kind of the target because you're the male member of the family. And also, like, you know, it's difficult to make this journey physically, as Jazz said, but also it costs, you know, it's not free. It costs a lot of money. If you come as a family, it costs a lot more. I've seen people when they come as a family, when I was at Calais, they've been exploited, like their children being exploited by smugglers. So it's a really, you know, it's a tough situation. So even the young men are exploited and are vulnerable, but it will more so if you're a girl, if you're a family. And so, yes, when people ask it, I feel like, I'm sure some people may ask it with good intention, but my experience has been people ask it because they see us as a threat. They see us as they fear us. And they think, you know, young men, we are a military service and we could cause problems. But actual fact, no, we are civilized citizens. We could make a difference and contribute in, you know, good and active citizens. So we're not troublemakers.
And they're really great reasons to highlight why it is often more men that are traveling, although the media is so distorted on it. It's absolutely still not accurate. And I get so many again emails saying, oh, I want to help women and children, and I'm not sure if I've ever got one saying I want to help single men. And I always feel super sorry. They're like my soft spot because they're so neglected and ignored. They're always the ones that are waiting at the back of the line because women and children generally go first, but with everything, and I really mean so much. It's so common that you see that, and people are thinking of projects for women and children, and so rarely for single men. Vittoria, in your experience on Samos, was it all young single men?
No, absolutely not. But I can relate 100% with what you were saying, that this is my soft spot as well. Unfortunately, the population in Samos, the demographics, so around 50% of the migrants and asylum seekers are men, and around 20 women and 20 children, maybe a little bit more children than women. And our organization decided and still decides to focus on women and children. And this is because, of course, we don't have as many resources as we would want to. And we need to focus primarily on the needs of women and children that are more considered as small vulnerable categories. So we did distributions, for example, during the COVID, the first phase of the pandemic, when our team went from 35 people to 5. So we had to really make this kind of decisions, and we decided to continue doing this, giving this support to women and children. But as just a good news from the field is that at the moment on Samos there is a huge winter distribution going on for the entire camp population. So all the NGOs that do distribution decided to collaborate together because they know how winter is tough, even in a country like Greece that everyone thinks, oh, winter is amazing. No, it's not, especially if you live in a tent. And the organization are leading this distribution these days. So the entire camp population is receiving clothes and essential items. So this is
that's really great. I'm getting updates on the WhatsApp. And before we go to the last question about what people can do to take action, I think that's really important. It's something people are really interested in. Jacob, just quickly, this same question, because it's hard. You've set up your centre is specifically for younger males, and that must be hard to get funding for, because I know a lot of the funding is for families or women and children. So what made you choose that demographic?
Well, yeah, good question. I mean, it plays into what a lot of us have said, that you know, so we talk about the refugee crisis, we talk about kind of single men trying to cross the channel or come to Europe. And I find it weird. I find it weird that in the 21st century, when so much of our rhetoric, so much of our kind of empathy is directed towards recognizing that, you know, things like gender are fluid, that, you know, mental health is something that affects, you know, men as much as women, you know, young people as much as old people. And then we somehow just resort to this kind of quasi, I don't know, historical, traditional, military-like language, because it serves a purpose. It serves a purpose to say young men are trying to come to our country. And we just go back on everything we're working towards in a society, which is to recognize that, you know, we do have this vulnerability, we have this sensitivity. I mean, maybe myself, like being in Greece, when I first went to Greece, I was actually only 21. And I was basically the same age as everyone we were working with as well. And you establish those kind of rapport, those relationships, and you realize that there's just, or you put yourself in that situation and you realize just how scary, how horrible, how tragic it is. And I can take an aeroplane when needed back to the UK to be back with family. And these are people who maybe they don't fall into the category of children. Maybe they're 18, maybe they're 19, but they're spending years without family, you know, at the same time when any other mother, any other father is, you know, taking their son, their daughter, whatever, to university, they're getting a job. And this is not happening for these people. This is also the demographic that's most isolated. You know, these young men are the people who are most often traveling alone, and for much longer periods of time. So there's so many reasons why the actual kind of the health issues, physical but mental specifically, that can affect people are more pronounced in this category than possibly others, where there's more support network, there's more family relations with you. And that's definitely one of the governing reasons why we've really focused on that group. And as you say, it's difficult, but it's also about, as we've said a few times, it's about educating not only ourselves but wider society, so that we just create a more ethical, a fairer system.
Yeah, in summary, there are absolutely women and children in this population, but there are reasons why there are a higher statistic of men, and just to be aware of that, and hopefully we've covered, I know we're doing this quite quickly, but hopefully we've covered and helped that. So what people are really keen to hear, I'm sure, is, are you guys super special with everything you're doing to educate people, the actions you're taking, or are you, like the title suggests, ordinary people? How did you end up doing this? Can other people do it? If so, how? And just looking at the questions on the side, what actions can people take? And obviously I'll definitely talk about Indigo at the end, but first it'd be really good to hear from you guys, what actions people can take. Gulwali, should we go to you first?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I think, sometimes we feel hopeless and helpless what's happening, and we will get overwhelmed by the news and what we see, the images. I mean, it's heartbreaking whenever I see people drowning and people dying. We can do only so much as individuals, as collectively, but we need government to do more. But as individuals, things that I encourage people to do, I think Tom asked the question and somebody else asked also, things we could do, volunteering. If you can't volunteer, give to charities who actually works on the ground. For example, Care for Calais is collecting coats and clothes for people there. Indigo does a lot of work when, directing volunteers, giving to charity, writing to our MPs saying, look, this is not okay. We need a humane system. We need to allow people to work. We need to allow family reunification. We need to have a system which is fair. And, so writing to MPs, volunteering, befriending. We could do, there's a lot of charities, for example, in London, elsewhere, you could do befriending. You could mentor a refugee and an asylum seeker, buddying, because they feel isolated. They sometimes taken to disperse to like places like Middlesbrough and somewhere like far away. And so if you live across the country, you'll be able to do that. Almost every town and city have a refugee welcome group, a refugee welcome network, support network, a City of Sanctuary group. So please get involved. And of course, I would encourage you to read my book to get a better understanding of these other books on the refugee subject as well. And please listen to podcast of the Worldwide Tribe. Jazz has done an amazing podcast series with a lot of great people, like Lo Dubs and a lot of other young refugees as well. So just be better informed, be educated, and do whatever you can. Donating to charity, writing to our MPs. Perhaps if you have a space, there's a charity called Refugees at Home. You could actually host a refugee at home who are homeless, who are destitute for some time until their situation is resolved. So there's so much we could do, and we can make a difference. We could, as Tesco says, every little helps. So there are things we could do which, might not solve the problem, but will make a difference to one or two people. That's something all of us have habit within us to touch people's lives in a positive way. And I hope we could do that.
Wow, there was so much information there of what people can do. Thank you. Maybe if you want to write it in the chat, if people want that, mentoring or hosting refugees at home, like there's so much. So do write it in the chat, Gulwali or Summary. You mentioned Worldwide Tribe podcast, another excellent way to inform yourself. Jazz, what's your answer to that question?
Yeah, Gulwali just summarized that so perfectly. I echo everything that he said. And people often ask me this question, and it is a difficult one to answer because I do believe that how you can help looks different for every single person here. So for a start, I want to say it's amazing that everybody here is here to educate themselves, because that is a massive step in taking action, learning, being aware of what's going on for refugees in your country, in Europe, in worldwide. But yes, I would say that rather than kind of looking externally, look within at what you have to offer. So as Gulwali said, it might be that you have a spare room. It might be that you have some time to give and you're a graphic designer and you could help someone with their CV, or you might have some clothing, or you might have money to donate, or you might have whatever your skill is or what it looks like for you. Have a think about that and then how that might be able to help somebody else. And that's something that I think we often bypass. So your own skills and learn, start conversations. We live in a time where having your voice heard is easier than ever through social media. And for me, I really didn't know anything about the refugee crisis 5.5 years ago, early 2015, when I first went to Calais. And it was a curiosity of asking lots of questions, I think, that then, and learning through social media, that kind of encouraged things to grow and develop. They're my pieces of advice, I think. Read Gulwali's book, volunteer with Indigo. You've got some amazing resources right here on this panel. And yes, the Worldwide Tribe podcast, we share amazing stories of heroic people, Gulwali being one of them. It's one of my favorite episodes. And there's some great stories there. We've got a film coming out on Thursday. So watching that, it's a couple of minutes long, sharing it, following the Worldwide Tribe and starting conversations. They're all little actions that you can take from the comfort of your home today. And I'll just finish by telling the story of a woman that I met in Calais who had come to volunteer and brought with her a foot spa, and she didn't know what she had to do or what she wanted to do in Calais, but she had this foot spa and she washed the feet of refugees. And that for me was just the most incredible act And it just shows that, you know, it could be anything, any small act that makes a big difference to somebody.
That's so great. Even we also sometimes have volunteers who volunteer for the volunteers, if that makes any sense. People that come out for volunteers. Like we had a masseuse, and he wasn't there for the refugees, he was there for the volunteers, because generally we're working very ridiculous hours and not looking after ourselves. It's very famous that we burn out easily and so on. And so it's so wonderful when people come out actually to also look after the people who are doing the frontline work. So that's really nice. Jacob, I think you've got some good ideas of what people can do to take action. I just have a feeling.
I mean, you know, there's already so many ideas. You know, we live in a world where we're told to think about one thing and then the next day we're told to think about something else. So if you do one thing, it's to find, you know, a news source or an organization that you just want to follow and allow them to keep you engaged so that you don't, you know, you don't drift away, because there are powerful advertising forces out there that force us to split our minds 1,000 ways. I mean, I can talk specifically, if you know, through Action for Education, the organization that I work with. I mean, you can come out to Greece, you can come and volunteer, you can do that through Indigo, you can do it through us. You can and use that as an opportunity to also learn about this situation whilst creating, you know, real kind of impact here. That's something you can do. And the other side of, I guess, our work is, and it's a quite nice alternative, which is through campaigning. And we run a big campaigning movement called Europe Must Act. And that group has chapters across cities all over Europe and in the UK, North, South, Scotland, Wales. And they're local groups that are bringing together activists, bringing together people who are engaging for the first time or for have been engaging for many years. And that's a way to bring together a citizens movement, and to move that firstly on, you know, a local town level or a local city level, then to push that onto the national level, and then hopefully ultimately create just a more humane policy. So there's, you know, it depends, yeah, what you can give and what time and what your motivations are.
Thank you, Jacob. Also, I'm hoping Victoria team will also put everyone's handles on here. It was on the event invites and things, but to follow everyone so you can keep up to date. Victoria, do you have anything to add? I know a lot's been covered. I don't know if there's more to add.
Yeah, well, maybe I can just add very shortly my story as a normal, whatever normal means, person. I studied architecture, and then all of a sudden I was living in Portugal, and I met a friend at a protest. I was not even going to the protest. I was just passing by, and I stopped and I met a person and I started talking. And the protest was about the EU borders and the Fortress Europe. And then he started talking about what was happening, and I was not very well informed at the time. And then it was just, you know, a simple moment of a person really wanting to like involve you, and you feeling that energy of the change that you can really have if you join more people together. And I think that changed really a lot my perception, because before I feel I was kind of like having a passive position about a lot of issues that are really important. And for me right now, I clearly see that having this passive position is actually actively choosing to accept injustice, because you are deciding that there is a lot of information out there, but you are not using it to inform yourself, to know more about borders that are of a community, the European community, and you are deciding not to do anything about it. So I would say, for me, they said amazing things. I wouldn't add anything that is not just, let's use the internet in a more aware and critical way, and let's connect in between each other. And I think that I am personally more than happy to, if you share my contact with people that are like, okay, what can I do? You now have an email, you can ask me, because there are so many things that we can all do. But maybe sometimes it's so much that you don't know what exactly.
Sometimes it's hard to know where to start. I would say, oh God, I mean, I also realised I didn't introduce myself. That is such an epic fail. I am so sorry, everyone. I'm just so excited to get going. But I'm Holly, and I run Indigo Volunteers, which is why we're talking about Indigo a lot, because It's a really useful service for people that want to take action. So anyone that wants to volunteer abroad, they can go on our website and see we've got around 50 partners that work along the European refugee route, and they tell us what their needs are, and then people apply and we match the needs according to what our partners need on the ground. And that can be absolutely anything. At the moment it's a little bit more limited than it ever has been, just because of quarantining and COVID-19 and a lot of projects going on hold for a short while, some of their operations, but definitely check it out. And beforehand, before COVID, we were placing like 99.9% of people that applied. So it's honestly, it's anyone and everyone. It really is ordinary people. And you think, oh, I don't have a specific skill. Yes, you do. There's always something people can do. You can work in a warehouse. You can chop vegetables in Calais. You can start a podcast and let people express what it's like on the ground. Like there's so much people can do. Like Jazz said, you go with your little foot bath. Like, I mean, honestly, you'd be really surprised. And so I really recommend looking at Indigo's website. Also, if you're looking to donate, I would also, I know I'm totally biased, but I would really donate to grassroots NGOs, like over bigger international NGOs, because the money is just how do I say this diplomatically, just better spent, or the better, I don't know how to say it diplomatically, but you know what I mean. And really follow all the panelists here, like really and the organizations that they're running, so you can keep informed. It's really good. Yeah, if you've got any specific questions, I'm sure the panelists won't mind getting a PM or something. I hope that's really helped to answer some of your questions. I can see a lot of things going on in the chat, but I think we have to wrap up now, because it's been over an hour. But if there's anything anyone wants to say last minute, any lasting words, panelists, or is that everything?
Can I just add quickly? I mean, we had a lot of things, sorry to bombard you, but there's a petition. So if you go on the Detention End website, if you go on Refugee Action, Asylum Matter, or other website, there would be a petition about in allowing asylum seekers to work. There's a letter you could just, like, all you have to do is put your postcode and name and send it to your MP. It's quite simple. All these websites have already framed letters for MPs around allowing people to work, ending detention, family reunification, and so on. Just check it out, like, you know, and you don't have to do much work. It's only literally 1-2 minutes it takes. So that I will add. And also, if you see any petition about safer and legal routes and about, you know, Europe must act and so on, just saying it. I mean, you know, just add your voice to it.
Yeah, it's a good point. You can just start, do little steps, and then all of a sudden, if you want it to snowball, it can, you know, and you just get involved somehow. Before you know it, you're living in Greece. But thank you so much to everyone that's joined and listened. Thank you so much to the Vittoria team for helping organise this. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much to the panelists who've all given up their evenings. Really, really thank you, who are all just like, yeah, I'll do it when I ask them, no hesitation. Thank you so much. Gulwali, I know you've got like a 2 or 3 week old daughter, so that's not easy. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for hosting. I just had 2 hours sleep before I came on, so I had some rest. Wishing you all well. Stay safe. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye bye, guys. Lovely to see you. Bye bye.